Welcome to MTV Middle East. Here is my abode. It's a little roomy near the entrance, but once you get past that, everything opens up. And here are our state-of-the-art training rooms. We usually spend training time talking about girls and gossiping, but my soldiers are the best that the United States has to offer. And here is my room. I have one for myself because I'm the leader, but everyone else seems to really enjoy their bunk beds all the same. Here is my treasury. It's small now, but you should wait until Pakistan gets us another economic stimulus package, and we will finally be able to afford that new hot tub I've heard so much about. And this sweet little room is my radio room, which I used to chat with... Oh crap. Dungeon Keeper was not a series I played in my childhood. Instead, it was Dungeon 3, the Dungeon Keeper clone with better visuals but took 3 games to get on the same level gameplay-wise. But I'm not talking about Dungeons 3 today. I'm talking about the absolute classic that is Dungeon Keeper 2. The Dungeon Keeper series was developed by Bullfrog Productions, a company I adore because they made Populous and Syndicate, and a company I hate for making Peter Molyneux relevant. Bullfrog is well known for creating the Dungeon Keeper subgenre and having more video games inspired by it than singers inspired by a mixture of DMT and a dark and closed room, as well as having more spiritual successes than black celebrities have illegitimate children. The original Dungeon Keeper game and its sequel spawned a variety of games trying to replicate its quality, with varying results. So it's not exactly a surprise there's so many floating around with the same mechanics, but you can't beat the original, or at least the sequel to the original. The first game has its own deal, and I don't want to get into it today. It's my video, so that's what we're doing. Dungeon Keeper 2 is a dungeon management game where you, as a lowly god, must take over the entire mapped world without ever leaving your basement. Dungeon Keeper thrives as a game that revolves around being on the side of the bad guys. The game's general plot is just about some backwater gremlin whose goal is to go up top, and to do that means turning as many obstacles to that goal into red water as possible. And there's nothing wrong with that. Evil is much cooler. We get cool hats, and we don't have to pay taxes. As a Dungeon Keeper, it is your job to build up a large and sprawling kingdom underground. Do this by building outposts, filling them with hardy, loyal minions, and build up strength while defending yourself from rogue journalists squadrons who want to annoy you, asking questions about your perfectly legal terrorist organization. Destroy them with no mercy. Once you are powerful enough, you fight your way to the enemy lord and run a pain train on his cracker ass with every minion under the sun with a level boosted up to the max. But getting to that point will take a while, so it's a good thing you have a lot of help. You may basically be a god, but outside of a singular hand that interacts with the world below, you have no physical presence. A Dungeon Keeper can't keep his dungeon alone. And he definitely can't do peasant labor, expand his empire, or handle the press. That's what imps are for. Imps are the backbone of your dungeon, and they exist to serve you and only you. They don't eat, sleep, have a wage, or become unhappy. They exist to be your eternal fanboy. You create imps. Those imps create rooms which generate mana. You use that mana to make more imps, make more rooms, and capture others, which generate more mana. By a certain point in time, you will have rooms upon rooms consisting of a 5-star underground clubhouse, near infinite stacks, and a small army of several despots, rejects, and degenerates, from which you can then call for a holy jihad to attack the leader of the infidels all at once. The only thing that imps can't do is fight. Imps have about as much fight in them as the average leftist political YouTuber, and they also have the courage of a leftist political YouTuber, and won't go anywhere near something that has the capacity to kill them. Which is why you need the aforementioned minions to make sure dungeon expansion goes smoothly. Minions pop out of a hole in the ground and will continue to do so until the max limit is reached. They need food, a wage, and a place to sleep. If you fill these requirements, they become a force to be reckoned with. When it comes to which loyal servants will fulfill your public fatwa, you are spoiled for choice. Goblins are your average low-class militia. They deal damage and they take damage. They aren't anything special, but they're unstoppable in a pack and they make good guards. I'd say don't send them to a fight alone, but that's not going to happen regardless. Warlocks shoot fireballs and do research. They are effective at long range and can heal at high levels. If they aren't in a fight and have nothing to do, they'll head to a library and make extremely good use of Google, strengthening your spells once they finish watching YouTube. Fireflies are good at scouting areas and moving quickly, but they suck at literally everything else, including being alive. Trolls are craftsmen. They can fight if you're desperate, but they're weaker than a goblin. So, much like a Chinese factory worker, it's best for them and you to stay in their factories and build and upgrade traps and doors endlessly and without rest. Don't worry, they love it. Dark elves are true to their race, and so are effective at sitting on their ass in one small insignificant area, killing anyone that so much as sneezes in the same direction as their guard room. If you possess them, you get access to sniper mode, which is a powerful ability to take advantage of if you figure out where the fuck the scope key is. Skeletons are wooden cannons. They don't have a ton of health, but they do decent damage, and it's only a matter of time before they disintegrate. The only way to make a skeleton is by knocking out a journalist, having them put in a re-education center, and then forgetting to torture them for information while you're doing something else. That prisoner of war will bleed out and die, and then create a skeleton. They don't need food or a wage, but when a skeleton runs out of health, they're gone like competent story writing in the late 2000s. Mistresses are the reason why millennials have dominatrix fetishes. They excel at torture, and they exist to be stared at by children who played the game in the 90s and had no access to internet porn or the like. They are extremely good attackers, and they spend way too much time in the sex dungeons. It's usually best to ignore the pleasure-filled screams and move on to another part of the dungeon, for fear of an invasion force taking over your keep while you're distracted. Salamanders are good at scouting and being fast, just like fireflies, but have the added ability of not sucking at being alive. Rogues are FBI skinwalker agents, and while they are good scouts and fair attackers, it's best to sacrifice them as quickly as possible before they take your gold or fuck off to the four corners of the dungeon in search of the Nigerian prince that keeps asking them for money. Bile demons are your tanks. They are slow, fat, lazy, greedy, perverted, and retarded. Name them appropriately. They have the highest health of any minion, but are about as enjoyable to be around as Chris Chan and are slower than molasses. They also have a natural spell called League of Legends Player, which is very effective in large crowds. Vampires are special minions that don't come up from a hole in the ground. Instead, they come up from a hole in the ground. Vampires are created with dead bodies. They are strong and can revive itself at the cost of 1 level. They're supposed to be overpowered, but I'm not the authority on vampire usage because I never use them. Black Knights are all-around bruisers. They are the strongest creatures you can reliably get and are endgame monsters that absolutely blend even the strongest heroes into a cranium shake while taking next to no damage themselves. They are expensive and moody, but you couldn't ask for a better frontline soldier. Dark Angels are the last units in the game you unlock. They are extremely low in number, but a max level Dark Angel will destroy multiple heroes in one shot, run through traps without a flinch, and can destroy 2 dungeon hearts without dropping below a quarter health. An average Dark Angel is squishier than a Black Knight but does double its damage. They're expensive to maintain but are so terrifying to fight that once you unlock them, your opponent will either trap spam or leave the game. Think of Dark Angels as your specialty unit with a higher body count than most African warlords. Extreme racism included. And finally, the Horned Reaper, aka Horny, is the guy who picks up the diamonds at the end of a campaign and can only be summoned with a special glowing button. There can only be one, and he's only around for a limited time. But this limited time limit means that Horny is invincible and immediately makes a beeline straight towards whichever unlucky bastard is closest to your dungeon, and then ramming them to death. Summoning Horny is an instant win button if you use him correctly at the cost of a mana pool the size of the Japanese national debt. You can summon him more than once a game, and it's best to leave him to his own devices because he will kill friendlies if they get in his way. Strategy-wise, if you want to use your army for things such as drawing the boss out with weak infantry and leading them into traps, using military genius in order to form an encirclement maneuver, or utilizing any tactical advantage in any way whatsoever, you are playing the game wrong. Grab all of your little minions and plop them directly on top of the thing you want dead like a liquidy shit. That is the only way to win and is also the purest form of greenskin LARP. If it worked for the Afghanis, it can work for you. Alternatively, possess a Black Knight or Mistress, make a beeline for the Lord, and ruffle stomp them with hit and run tactics to ensure they can't return the favor. If you think that's unfair, play a late game campaign, take one look at the AI spamming traps, and come back. You will despise the AI by the end of the level. Most of the game is relatively easy. You build up a massive goon squad, issue a public fatwa on the boss that ends the game when you kill him, and then use lightning until you run out of magic or get carpal tunnel. A lesson to be learned with game design is that when you design a game, designing a very cheap spell that causes a considerable amount of damage, locks the target in a falling animation for over 5 seconds, and can be used with a cooldown of 0 seconds, should be the very first priority for people like me who enjoy cheesing the shit out of every game I play. However, nothing is as cheesy as possession. By possessing a character, you get full control of all of their attacks with a generous cooldown. You can also dodge any attacks, resulting in the creation of the most effective run and gun fighters in the entire game. Additionally, you can manually recruit other minions to follow you around and attack anything that goes near you. You can attack much more frequently than AI controlled minions can, and you can defeat a boss with effectively no effort. How much does this godlike spell cost to cast? 10% the cost of the lightning spell. You learn very quickly how potent a spell can be. There are a series of extremely powerful spells that have the capacity to change the game. Roleplay as a Fortune 500 company after a 5% drop in revenue, inflation not included. Utilize the undeniable power of tunnel vision, convert enemies to Judaism, and effectively use a spell that uses a metric shit ton of mana to mildly annoy your enemy. Yes, this game is in fact very fun. Rooms are the backbone of the dungeon, mostly because they produce magic, which means more lightning spells. Generally speaking, rooms are self-explanatory. Treasure rooms hold gold in a spot, guard rooms guard things, training rooms train, hatcheries provide crunchy sustenance, casinos recreate closed-loop economy, and torture chambers can red pill enemies to your side. They also provide considerable entertainment to dungeon keepers with very sad home lives. I won't bother explaining the rest because rooms are the simplest part of the game. Same with spells. Mana will almost never be a problem for you until later campaigns, so do whatever you want with it. The thing you need to be constantly on the lookout for is fat stacks. If there's one thing in the world minions love, it's murder. And if there's one thing they love more, it's money. Keeping a dungeon safe is a taxing job and every minion expects their fair share. Therefore, just like real life, the cogs in the machines of an evil beyond their comprehension will ignore their horrifying dystopian lifestyle in the light of payday. Payday means every minion collecting their dues, and the more you have, the more money you better have in stockpile. Because then, they will shit themselves in anger and ask for dangerous things, like unions or dental. Avoid this at all costs. You will be notified when payday is beginning to come around, and if you lack the funds, you better hope there's a gold vein in those next couple of blocks, otherwise you'll be cursed with the horror of employee social programs. Each minion knows their worth, and they don't skim off the top unless they're from the FBI, so you won't get scammed by your employees even if you're somewhere else. But keep in mind that while payday is more important than anything in this world for your little unionless sociopaths, not dying is a considerably higher goal. If you want a level done and your employees are asking for fair wages, just dump them on the boss and the complaining will magically disappear. Until the screaming starts. The cacophony of hammers when you pass a workshop, the idle clocks of chickens in a hatchery, and the screams of pleasure and pain emanating from the torture room, melding with the demonic choir, develop a brilliant atmosphere that rattles around the walls of the dungeon. The character designs are brilliant and fitting, and the cinematics are so bad it's fucking hilarious. They are cartoony, exaggerated, and animated with the same finesse of a three-dimensional porn artist. The voice acting consists mainly of grunts and idle sounds, except for the mentor, played by Richard Ridings, who was one of the best and most memorable parts of this game, and nothing will ever top his voice and his creative quips that he makes during your playthrough.
Are you sure you haven't been playing Populous? Keeper, your dungeon is emptier than your head. The very rock yawns with anticipation of your next fascinating move. Surely even dungeon keepers must be tired to a lair of some description. You have an excess of mistresses. There's a word for keepers like you. Your dungeon is full of yogurt.
If you don't know who Richard Ridings is, let me remind you by mentioning some of his roles as various Space Marines and Chaos Space Marines in Warhammer 40k Space Marine, Hunter from Devil May Cry 4, and motherfucking Daddy Pig. His voice is so goddamn powerful and pleasant to the ears that it makes me feel self-conscious about making you listen to my garbage fucking voice that makes me sound like a small, narcissistic little child, despite the fact that I turn 20 next year. There are 20 levels in this game, not including multiple choice dungeons and special minigames, and they range from building up an empire of dangerous monsters to murder a lord by slowly taking over his own castle without his knowledge, meaning you can live in his walls and drive him insane with paranoia, to here's some shitty vampires. Now attack this multi-layered castle with nothing but some geriatric undead fancy pants and some skeletons instead of creatures that are designed to attack castles. Some are challenging, some are easy, some are straight up unfair, and I guarantee you will lose patience with the game at least once. But it's all worth it, because the game was really ahead of its time with things like NPC AI and pathing, except imps who have about as much self-preservation as a whistleblower when he can't escape his home country fast enough, and prefers turning floors from grey to red instead of not dying and revealing my dungeon heart's location to every hero south of the equator. Dungeon Keeper 2 is a genuinely brilliant game. Every attempt at replicating its magic has fallen short, and while there are others that are similar to it and some that are just straight up amazing even when compared to it, there's still nothing quite like the original. If it seems like your cup of tea, or your repressed memories of possessing an imp and plug walking straight into the torture room for the only interactions with females you will have for years have opened up, then I highly recommend buying it legally. It's on GOG and it's always cheap. Get it during any moderately significant holiday for about $2. This would be a great time to mention a remake or sequel to the game for people who loved 1 and 2, and Dungeon Keeper 3 was actually announced and started development with the exact same studio. However, unfortunately for the developers, they were owned by EA Studios, which means that the game was immediately cancelled after its concept stage in order to make room for Harry Potter video games. From that point onward, Bullfrog ceased to exist. And on that lovely note, Dungeon Keeper is a wonderful series. It was a short-lived franchise, blessing its fans by only fucking up once and being a childhood classic. For everyone except me. Well, I've played it now. And while I am a being not capable of nostalgia, for my childhood was bleak and filled with subpar shows on ABC3, and because I am not a primitive soy-drinking monkey who experiences overwhelming serotonin by being spoon-fed the same shitty, repetitive drivel that is destroying the very industries they pretend to care about. Regardless, I enjoyed this game immensely, and it tickled my particular itch. Try it for yourself to see if your itch is tickled the same. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
You have an excess of mistresses. There's a word for keepers like you.